Some may find the following disturbing. Discretion is advised.
Never before in the history of sports podcasts have two men brought you opinion and analysis like these two. They speak for a city that's desperate for wins and titles, not whining and travesty. You might not agree with what they have to say, but you'll defend their right to say it. Sports fans across the world, from Chicago, Illinois, this is the Mac and Reed Show.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome in to another edition of the Mac and Reed Show right here on the Barroom Network. Happy 2025 to everybody. A Merry New Year. Can't say it after this weekend. Don't you dare on the street to me or Ross. Follow along at Barroom Network for all the great programming we have in this Bears offseason and throughout the football season and sports seasons beyond that you know and love in Chicago and beyond for that matter. I hope you're watching live on YouTube at home in the comfort of your home if you're in the Midwest, certainly, or wherever you're at. Spotify, iTunes for the audio only versions. And I'm at the Real 11 Mac on social media, and Ross is at Ross Reed. Got a lot to get to in this first show of ours in 2025. Put a ribbon on the Bears season of 2024, first season for Caleb Williams. And man, we'll talk about what to expect in this next season. It was certainly out on a high note with that win at Lambeau. We'll go over the head coaching list that sort of came out today and is getting more finalized by the day. Who's staying, who's going on the roster for the Bears, some final thoughts on Caleb Williams, and then later in the show, we'll, of course, go over the NFL playoffs with the wild card weekend. Should be a fun one on Saturday and Sunday football. And then to boot, big week starting tomorrow if you're tuning in live with us on a Wednesday night. Tomorrow we got, the Notre Dame and Penn State game, and then we'll have Ohio State and Texas. We'll talk about those matchups as well. None of the top four seeds in it, and surprises along the way. Who knows what we'll get to. But, of course, joined as always by my man, my co-host. He's sky high on those Peloton leaderboards. Took his Christmas tree down in a timely fashion. Good. He's grown his illustrious T-shirt collection over the holidays to about 400 strong. His favorite rom-com is Something's Gotta Give. It's a new year, but same great guy. Ladies and gentlemen, Ross Reed.
Yes, sir. I don't know what my favorite rom-com is. It might be like When Harry Met Sally or something like that.
I just had to guess. Yeah,
that's a good movie, though. It's a good choice.
You don't like Nicholson, so I don't think that was. It's not that you don't like. You don't
I do like Jack. Yeah, I don't like him in that rom-com. I like Jack Nicholson like in a feisty way. Definitely, maybe really underrated rom-com movie too. Back when I was still liking Ryan Reynolds movies, not so much anymore. But
is that the one where he's fat?
No, that's the one where he's got
the one where he's fat at the beginning.
Yeah. He's got that's the one where he's
over the holidays.
He's got like I forget the young lady's name. She was in Zack and Miri Make a Porno, and then it's got Borat's wife as well as the one that he ends up with at the end of the movie. He's like works for the Bill Clinton campaign. It's actually a pretty decent movie.
Knocked Up. If Knocked Up's a rom-com, then fucking unbelievable. Right. That's a great one.
All those Apatow movies were in that vein. But happy 2025. We can't say Happy New Year anymore. One of my favorite salty geriatric guys. I know, but Larry David told us after January 7th, you can't say it anymore. And I abide by that.
You're right. Yeah. What Larry says goes.
Shout out to Curb Your Enthusiasm. Yeah, happy to be here. Happy to see you. And all the Bears fans are happy that they got a W in Lambeau Field on Sunday. And now we get to dive into 16 head coaching candidates for the Chicago Bears. 16.
Oh my God, that's not even the list that I had. I had 12 on the list that's in front of me. I think, you could probably say there's only maybe 5 or 6 guys who would genuinely be considered, but Jesus, just to fill it out, not only the local sports talk guys, but, national saying that list is just exhausting. It doesn't make any sense to put 16 guys on the list, but let's talk about Ross. We, as you mentioned, the Bears beating the Packers in Lambeau for the first time since 2015 was a way to go out, and it's been dissected ad nauseum. But it once again, kudos need to be given to the fans who traveled to Lambeau Field, and kudos to Caleb Williams and Kyra Santos who were in the same situation that they were in the first time at Soldier Field against the Packers, and they got their sweet, sweet revenge. Cairo Santos with a 50-plus yarder in cold weather, and that was awesome. It was cool to see. Obviously, getting the first win in 2025, so to speak, is cool and all. You did it against the Packer squad without Jordan Love. Christian Watson lost for the season with his ACL, which has playoff implications for Green Bay. Josh Jacobs didn't play, but you take the win when you can, and that streaks are made to be broken. It was 11 straight for the Packers until that game on Sunday, and now, Ross, you alluded to it. Now you're really focusing. We'll lead with the head coaching search, and we know who's not on that list is Mike McCarthy, who was denied by the Cowboys. They got stiff-armed on that one, which was pretty hilarious. And anybody on this list, and shout out to Tooch, also has a great show on the Barroom Network here, and everybody watching and able to comment, feel free to say if you hate a name, love a name. We want to hear from you as Ross and I go through this. But, number 1, 2 guys we've heard a lot about are Ben Johnson. That's one of everybody's favorite OCs coming out, declaring for potential head coaching vacancy now. Mike Vrabel has been floated a lot. Aaron Glenn, Joe Brady from the Bills, Brian Flores from the Vikings, Drew Petzing, Anthony Weaver from the Miami Dolphins, Thomas Brown kind of in the running, but to be real, Mike Kafka, Art Smith out of Pittsburgh, Todd Monken from Baltimore, David Shaw of the Broncos, and then Pete Carroll. Everybody forgot about him. Formerly of Seahawks glory. And then who else is filling out this list of 16, Ross?
They have requested an interview for Joe Brady, offensive coordinator for the Bills. They've requested Cliff Kingsbury. Did you message him? They've requested an interview with him now, so add him to the list. And the latest name, as of within the last few hours, is Iowa State head coach Matt Campbell. They have requested or at least Brad Biggs has said that the Bears want to interview him. So all in all, I do count Mike McCarthy because they tried to talk to him. They requested permission, even though that was denied. You're looking at 16 names: Thomas Brown, Mike Vrabel, Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, Anthony Weaver, Pat Singh, Kafka, Flores, Arthur Smith, Mike McCarthy, Todd Monken, David Shaw, Joe Brady, Pete Carroll, Cliff Kingsbury, Matt Campbell. But I think you hit it on the head. I mean, all these interviews are
a lot of names.
That's a lot of names. But I think a couple things to factor in here. Number one, all these interviews are going to be via Zoom, which is much to the chagrin of a lot of Chicago media today. They were upset that Mike Vrabel and Pete Carroll were not coming in person. I think I'm okay with that. I think everybody should be on a level playing field for round one. Yeah. And I think most importantly, the reason why you see so many names on the list, you cannot talk to your Ben Johnson in person or your Brian Flores in person until January 20th. The NFL changed that rule. If there's a team, an assistant in the playoffs right now, you have to wait until after the division round to be able to get those guys in person. So at this point, you want to talk to Scooby-Doo? You want to talk to Mickey Mouse? Like, it doesn't matter. It's okay. You're in a holding pattern right now until you are able to talk to, in my opinion, the two big dogs, the two guys on this list that I think are going to be the finalists at the end, which are Brian Flores and Ben Johnson, of course. I think those two guys are going to be the two hot names on the list, and I think your head coach is going to come from one of those two spots.
Interesting. So, we, like we said, so many names, and, treat it like if you were to apply to Google tomorrow, y'all got to do it through Zoom the same way before you're really vetted and out to the second round, third round, whatever. And like you said, there's that rule in place to make sure that, Ben Johnson can't be interviewed, or Brian Flores, guys like that whose teams are still in the playoffs. It's, it's a list where you could just eliminate so many guys. I feel like a Mike Kafka and Arthur Smith, I wouldn't really think would be in there. David Shaw. I think if truly the guys that are interested are, like your big four would probably be the Ben Johnson, Mike Vrabel, Joe Brady, and maybe Pete Carroll, something like that. If you're to throw out four right away of that list, in my eyes, and an outlier, maybe Aaron Glenn. I think they maybe want to poach within the division too if they potentially can. But it's huge in every sense of the word. And we know the vacancy, obviously left by Matt Eberflus is a big one. When you brought him back after losing season, you liked his principles, you liked his philosophy in football, you liked everything he brought to the table as a guy, as a human, but it just did not translate to just so many things where so many decisions for that matter, which cost them games. And we see it as fans and we're like, well, what the hell is this guy doing? How is he not know that he cannot take the time out with him or something like that? So now it kind of leads into Pooch's question here, looking at the NFL playoffs. Does defense still win championships, or is it offense that wins championships now? And I'd argue that it's offense. I think you look around the league. I think you look at certainly the Bills and the Ravens and the Chiefs and the Eagles. Those are four really offense-heavy teams. They have good defenses, majority to lean back on. Maybe not the Bills, even though they had a few games where they were takeaway machines. But they, and they're also they have very good quarterbacks under center, right? Very proven quarterbacks for that matter. But behind the quarterback, you've looked at, and I know it was funny. I was reading that Josh Allen said something about not giving Joe Brady credit, which was his little dig at Joe, just making sure that he didn't go so quickly. That could be said with Jared Goff and Ben Johnson. These guys, the signal calling matters because what they see on the field is different from what they see up in the booth and what they have watched on game tape, what they do in the moment there. And what we've seen from those guys that I've mentioned, Mike Vrabel is a guy who, I think encompasses those principles of like a Matt Eberflus, who's kind of the more defensive-minded one of this list. But if I'm trying to pick a head coach tomorrow, it really, I want it to be the script is flipped. I know Matt Nagy was kind of that guy you thought would be the offensive-minded second coming, like the new, the savior, I guess, that the Bears would have as far as its offense is concerned. With the development of Caleb Williams, I really need an offensive-minded coordinator here. I think that, it's pretty clear that Ryan Pace will come back. Ryan Poles, will come back, and he will be dictating how this roster is changed going into 2025 and maybe beyond that. But with Caleb Williams' development, I got to see an OC here that turned into a head coach in my eyes. But what are you thinking of maybe your big four, Ross, and maybe your top choice at this point?
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, if I were to, whittle this down to four names, for me, it comes down to Ben Johnson. It comes down to Joe Brady. Those are your two top offensive minds right now that are out there on the market. And then on the defensive side, I would want to. I hold Pete Carroll in very high regard. And I think the only thing that's holding him back right now is his age. He's in his 70s, but he's not a regular 70-year-old guy. The guy's in amazing shape. He's got a lot of enthusiasm. He's got a lot of energy. And I think he's proven that he's been able to develop on his team two quarterbacks already in Russell Wilson and Geno Smith. So he's got some history, even going back to his USC days. He's had history as well with very good quarterbacks there. I think Pete Carroll is a true CEO of a franchise type of guy. You of course should be curious to see who his offensive coordinator is. At this point, I just don't think Mike Vrabel is a viable option, just because I do think he signed sealed over to New England. I don't think New England makes the move that they did this past Sunday with firing Gerard Mayo, and then they hurried up and blew through that Rooney Rule process yesterday by talking to Pep Hamilton and Byron Leftwich to not have Mike Vrabel locked up probably within the next 48 to 72 hours. So and the fourth guy on the list, I think, would be Brian Flores. So my top four for me would be Ben Johnson, Joe Brady, Brian Flores, Pete Carroll. I personally do eliminate Pete because of his age. I hate to be the ageism guy or anything like that, but I do think that, when you look at a quarterback like you have in Caleb Williams, hypothetically, you'd like to have a guy that will be with him for the next 10 plus years, and that's where I have my concerns with Pete Carroll. My concerns with with Brian Flores, the Miami thing was shaky. He went through a lot of different offensive coordinators, and the quarterback who was supposed to be the franchise guy said that, listen, he was very abrasive with me and things were rough there. And we heard even comments today about Ryan Fitzpatrick talk about his time that, in Miami and how that went Brian Flores too. Maybe Brian's learned. So I don't want to hold that against him. but that's a little bit of a slight right now. And I think Ryan Poles is going to have some tough conversations with Brian Flores about what happened in Miami and how he's learned from that. Joe Brady has been a hot offensive name. Guy was a play caller at LSU when that offense was humming, Joe Burrow days. You see what he's done with Josh Allen. My question with him is that Josh Allen or is that Joe Brady? Is that a combination of both? Is it 60-40? Who is it? You've got the MVP of the year, but Josh Allen feels like he's got a Superman cape on week after week. Does that translate over into the offense with Joe Brady? And then, of course, Ben Johnson is the one-on-one. This is the guy that has resurrected Jared Goff's career. He's been able to get a guy like Jameson Williams, who's been sort of a malcontent from time to time, to be a productive number 2 receiver. Amon St. Brown was a mid-round draft pick, and he's a true number 1 receiver in the league. They've got the Sonic versus Knuckles attack with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. The offensive line is playing well. They lead the league in points. They lead the league, and they're just off the charts. You see, like Tooch said on Sunday, he smoked Brian Flores' boots, right? Like at the end of the day, you want, especially with a guy like Caleb Williams, who, in my opinion, is a 200-mile-per-hour Ferrari. You want the professional driver behind that Ferrari to be able to navigate it. And that's why I say Ben Johnson should be the next head coach of the Chicago Bears and give him what he wants in terms of a paycheck. And I do think that he can coexist with Ryan Poles. And if he can't, for whatever reason, I mentioned this to somebody today, I personally think if Ben Johnson is the next coach for the Chicago Bears, that does not preclude Ryan Poles from not losing his job down the line. I think Ben Johnson will have a higher higher future with the Chicago Bears than Ryan Poles. But I do think hiring Ben Johnson enhances Ryan Poles' position and what he's able to do going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Whatever roster he inherits, his work's going to be cut out for him, as is Ryan Poles' job going forward. The general pointed out Liam Cohen as well, the Bucs offensive coordinator. If he is to be interviewed, that'd be an interesting name. And what he's done with him and Baker Mayfield together has been really great as they prepare for a wild card berth this weekend. I'm with you, and majority of Bears fans the same way. It's a shift where we're not looking for the Lovie Smiths of the world or the Ditka's kind of more defensive minded of mindset going forward with this team, because you do have this Ferrari at quarterback in Caleb Williams, who is a true talent, which we'll talk about in a bit and sort of grade and review his year. And Ben Johnson would be a home run. As much talent as there is in that Detroit offense, someone's got to drive the ship, and Ben Johnson has done a great job. You could say the same about Dan Campbell, what he's been able to do, but he is absolutely, sort of more defensive minded when it comes to it, even though he played a little bit of offense in the NFL as well. So Ben Johnson, we give him whatever you want, the blank check. You want to do your due diligence. You know who your top guys already are going into this, and you're just sort of waiting out the playoffs to see when you can finally make your announcement. But it seems OC is turned into head coach is the way to go. I know a lot of folks. Mike Vrabel wrapped up his interview with the Bears today, and I do think that it's just kind of filling out the name for these guys, or filling out the list for Ryan Poles and company. And he seems to, on that note, be the guy taking complete ownership of the head coaching search, as well it should be. Kevin Warren will probably have his say, as will the McCaskies, but at the end of the day, it's the same thing you did with Matt Eberflus. The blame is going to fall on you if this does not work out, or if you whiff and you end up signing a head coach who can't develop Caleb Williams and can't steer you into the playoffs and into a Super Bowl win and beyond. Keep the comments coming, guys. And I want to talk about so we really don't know at this point. I think Ben Johnson and as you mentioned, is that top name, and Joe Brady. But at this point, too, the offensive roster, defensive roster is going to be in flux. And, in the trenches, it's going to be huge. That the Bears, after that win against Green Bay on Sunday, it's solidified that they'd have the 10th overall pick at this point. So, a lot of mocks are having them have offensive tackle address that. There's a question. It sort of leads me into the first stay or go question, is a guy like Tevin Jenkins, who is looking at free agency. One of the few guys who played a majority of the Bears snaps on that offensive line outside of Darnell Wright, who we know is going to be sticking around, who's great at right tackle. Tevin Jenkins, when you're looking at, you're going to have to hit in the draft and in free agency. It's hard to weigh both and think about Tevin Jenkins. And you're also weighing in, who you may potentially want to franchise in the offseason as well. But what do you say you do with the Tevin Jenkins right now, Ross?
It's got to go. I love Tevin Jenkins. I love him as a talent, but he just can't stay on the football field enough for the Bears to rely on him. This year, he had his highest number of snaps as a Chicago Bear, and he still finished at like about 65, 66% of the snaps in the season. That's just not going to be good enough, unfortunately. I don't know how not only the Bears, but any team around the NFL can give this guy more than a 1 or 2 year deal going forward. And like I said, I think he's just a highly talented young man. He just can't stay on the football field. And again, when this all goes back to developing Caleb Williams, protecting Caleb Williams, and you can't have that kind of reliability on the offensive line, it just causes a lot of issues. It's a huge ripple effect. Look at that offensive line this year and the holes that they've had due to a variety of different things. Tevin Jenkins couldn't stay on the field this year. Nate Davis was an abject disaster, right? Yep. All season, right? They tried to go out there and they tried to get like your Ryan Bates of the world and Coleman Sheltons and Doug Kramers, and these guys were just stopgap pieces. And then all of a sudden you see your quarterback getting sacked for damn near 70 times this year. That just can't happen. You've got to have some more stability on that offensive line. I like Braxton Jones and Darnell Wright. I'm okay with it. I like Darnell Wright obviously a lot more. I think he's going to be a very, very good right tackle in this league with a better scheme and a better offensive play caller. I think Braxton Jones obviously has been up and down. I think he's very much in the mold of Charles Leno. He's not Mr. Right. He's Mr. Right now, but it's also very hard to find left tackles in this league. He's serviceable. He might be the guy for another year until you get into the 2026 draft, which is a lot deeper at left tackle. But with that said, I talked to our barroom friend, Greg Gabriel, who also hosts a show on this network. And we've been talking a lot about Kelvin Banks Jr., the offensive tackle from Texas. And it's going to come down to how these guys measure out in the combine, specifically with their arm length and stuff like that. So the two names that you're going to hear a lot of, offensive lineman Will Campbell from LSU, offensive lineman Kelvin Banks from Texas. And Greg, agrees, and he's obviously done this for a living. Whether those two guys are going to be tackles at the next level is going to really depend on their arm length. If it comes a little bit shorter than what you like, you're probably going to see both guys as a guard. I'm okay with picking either guy, whether it's at tackle or guard, because it is that important to solidify this position. But it's going to be interesting. I'm not opposed to seeing a Braxton Jones, Kelvin Banks, free agent, potential second-round pick, Darnell Wright Jr.
It's a tough situation, perhaps the toughest of the positional needs that the Bears have because of Nate Davis blowing up in their face, because Ryan Bates was injured constantly. Tevin Jenkins' injury struggles as well. Braxton Jones, you mentioned. Now you're looking at, again, Darnell Wright really being that one sort of guaranteed comeback and fit into that offensive line starting five. So you really want to look at the bookends, and you think that now that obviously you have Darnell Wright at right tackle, you want to protect Caleb Williams' blind side. If that's Braxton Jones and he can remain healthy, that's fine by me. But the interior is going to be a huge cause of concern too, because you want to be able to run this football. DeAndre Swift and Roschon Johnson. DeAndre Swift almost at 1,000 yards in the season. They went away from him too often in those first, few games, and then he really got it going. We saw him get a touchdown on Sunday against Green Bay, but it felt really imbalanced as a whole. So it'll be curious to see if there are any options in free agency, and then what they want to do with that number 10 overall pick. Could very well be one of these young offensive tackles.
And I completely agree with you. Free agency is going to dictate a lot of this. This is a down year for free agency in the NFL. But listen, the number one guy in the market is Tevin Smith, guard from the Kansas City Chiefs. If for whatever reason the Kansas City Chiefs decide that they don't want to pay this guy to be the highest paid guard in the league because they're paying Pat Mahomes and Travis Kelce and Chris Jones and a bunch of other blue chip guys, already paying a lot of guys in that offensive line too, like Juwan Taylor. I fully expected Ryan Poles just to go in there and just dump a bag on that guy and make him, I'm sorry, Trey Smith, thanks, Such, to make him the highest paid guard in the league, which drastically changes how you approach the draft. So a lot could happen even before the draft in terms of how this falls out. Obviously, that would be a dream come true, because I do agree with OKC Bear Boy here. You don't ideally want to start two rookies on that offensive line next to Darnell Wright and Braxton Jones, but you might be forced to, because this is just a down year in free agency. The dream is to be able to go out there and pay a guy like Trey Smith and then address interior offensive line either in the first round or the second round. You have some more flexibility. The name out there to me too, listen, from a draft standpoint, as we're talking a lot about offensive line, but if for whatever reason Abdul Carter is there on the board at 10th overall, and I don't expect him to, but that's your edge rusher that you'll see tomorrow night on Penn State, 6'3", 252 pounds, 11 sacks this year. You run to the podium and you take that edge player, because they, listen, we talk about offensive line and how important it is, but the Bears still have to continue to generate some kind of a pass rush in a division that has potentially Sam Darnold going forward, Jordan Love, and Jared Goff. And while Montez Sweat is a very good football player, he does not have a lot of help opposite of him. And we even saw what happened with when Billings went down with an injury. That defensive line just kind of went to crap a little bit. It'd be nice to have a blue chip pass rusher opposite Montez Sweat. So Abdul Carter, Will Campbell, Kelvin Banks Jr., I think those are names that you're going to hear about. A little Mason Graham, he's probably going to go a little high, probably go like to Jacksonville, 5th overall. Not a big Mikael Williams guy, the Georgia edge rusher. He's been too inconsistent for me. I'd like to see the Bears walk away with one of those three guys in the draft.
And outside of the offensive line, as far as that, group of 11 for the Bears to trot out there next year, obviously Caleb Williams, and I think the skill position players are relatively set. Cole Kmet on a longer-term deal, and Rome coming off a rookie season where it left something to be desired, but the same could be said for Caleb Williams. DJ Moore on that got re-signed as well, as we know. Question is Keenan Allen. He said today he would go back to L.A. If it came down to, or basically his three choices are the Rams, the Chargers, and the Bears. Mm-hmm. And I liked what I saw from Keenan Allen. I think as it went both ways with Caleb Williams, where he had some opportunities to hit Keenan Allen for some big gains or touchdowns. And Keenan Allen had some drops just when he wasn't expecting it or whatever happened there. I'd like to see the trio brought back if the money's right. And, I think that would be in Caleb Williams' best interest.
Yeah, listen, I mean, Keenan Allen, 70 receptions this year. He has 744 yards. He led the team on offense and 7 receiving touchdowns. I'm not opposed to it. You hit it on the head, though. What's the cost? Because he is a guy that's getting up there in age. He's looking a little slower than normal. He did miss a couple games this year. Not too many. He only missed 2 games this year.
That's better than his average, I feel like, too.
That's true.
Allen, yeah.
That's true. And you already invested a big contract into DJ Moore, and then you invested a top 10 pick into Roman Dunze. And I also think with Keenan Allen on the football field this year, you saw a dramatic drop-off in production with Cole Kmet, because Keenan Allen essentially took the Cole Kmet role. Kmet this year only had 47 receptions on 55 targets this year for 472 yards. That's just not going to get it done for me, from my opinion, from my number one tight end. So, I start to wonder, does Keenan Allen cut into the development of some of your other younger guys who you're paying a lot of money to? And I look at a guy like Ben Johnson. I keep going back to Ben Johnson, but you look at the receivers that the Lions have put out there this year, and Ben Johnson has been able to get some numbers and some stats out of some really makeshift guys. I mean, you've got Amon St. Brown. He's one of the best in the league. Jameson Williams is a first round pick, excuse me. And so is Sam Laporta. But then he kind of put it together. Tim Patrick was out there. He was an outcast guy from the Broncos back in the day. Khalif Raymond had a solid year. And then he uses his backs a lot in the receiving game. And so that also could be a factor as to whether Keenan Allen is going to be on this team going forward. As I think right now, I don't think so. I don't think that the Bears will pay him what he wants, because you have to factor in this is a guy that wants to be in California, wants to be in warm weather. His family probably still lives there. He got a lot of kids. And so they probably don't want to uproot themselves from, Chicago for a 1 or 2 year deal. So you got to pay a little bit of a tax on that. I don't think that the market is going to fall to the Bears for what Keenan wants. If it does, and you can get him under 15 mil, maybe for even 1 year, I'm okay with that. But once it starts hitting closer to that number and going north, I think you have to let him walk. And I think you have to kind of address that third receiver spot in free agency, and maybe take a look at drafting another guy in the mid-round.
I think you look at importance, and James Christo points it out in the chat that the Bears could not afford Allen if they put money on the O-line. That's exactly right. If you are to sign a interior like guard of the future, or a center, then I would absolutely put that priority. I would prioritize that over Keenan Allen coming back with the Bears. And on the defense, there's been some talk of maybe potentially trading Jalen Johnson if you were to maybe do that, even though he's making the Pro Bowl this year. There's some proponents for that to clear some cap space for other guys. But if he's your true lockdown corner, hard to see that happening. That's just, spitballing ideas at this point. You talked about the injury that was huge to Andrew Billings, who was having a great season. If he can come back healthy, curious to see, if he continues to have that sort of production for the Bears. Montez Sweat still kind of a question mark after getting the bag last year. I think the secondary is probably, more solid in this group as far as Kevin Byard, who had that great hit on Sunday, and he looked like he stepped in really well at free safety, and Kyler Gordon and Tyreek Stevenson, if they could just remain healthy. Tyreek Stevenson, this year will just be chalked up to that Washington game where he was talking to the crowd. And I feel like he just does a little bit too much jawing. But of the defense, there's guys that you're hot on getting them out of the Hallis Hall, or some guys that you have your eyes on that need to stay with this team.
Yeah, I love the secondary for the Bears. I think the secondary played well. I know Tyreek Stevenson had his ups and downs. The peak down for him was obviously the Hail Mary game, and then he struggled for a couple of weeks after that, and you can see it. I'm pretty sure mentally he was not in the right state of mind, but he bounced back the last few weeks, and he had a couple of good games. He did have a pass on Sunday, obviously, that Malik Willis threw up a Hail Mary again on 3rd and long, and he let the receiver get in front of him for a catch. But I think he played better. He's a guy that just, you're going to have to constantly stay on his ass. He needs to stay focused, but he's a very talented second-round guy. I think Kyler Gordon's going to get an extension for the Bears, and I think that's well-deserved. He's one of your young pieces that you drafted, and Ryan Poles needs a win with guys that he's drafted. I think he's going to come back. Jaquan Brisker is still under contract, but obviously he's got some concussion scares, and we don't know what his future bodes. But all in all, I like the secondary. The defensive line needs some work. They've got Montez Sweat, who's a bona fide starter. You've got Billings when he's out there healthy. He's a good nose tackle, but they lack depth, and they lack a impact guy opposite Sweat to get after the quarterback. It's the linebacker position to me that I think could be in flux this year. As much as we like the free agent signings of Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards, you kind of can't justify keeping those guys at their high dollar amount with the production that they've had. And this is more so leaning towards Edmonds than Edwards. I like Edwards a lot. I think he's been steady. I think he's actually one of the more underrated linebackers in the league. Been pretty disappointed with Tremaine Edmonds since he's been with the Bears. And I think we all expected a little bit more, especially when he was trying to fill the shoes of a Roquan Smith. And I'd be wondering if, the Bears release him. He's got a high cap number, but the dead cap money, not that high. And they might be able to even spread it out a little bit. I'd be wondering if he's a cut that they make and they just go with a younger alternative at that point. Maybe even draft a guy. There's some guys that are going to be in free agency as well. But at some point, for me, with the Bears, the money has to shift from the defense to the offensive side of things, especially when you have this quarterback on this rookie contract right now. You've been spending a lot of money this year on the defense last couple of years. I don't think it really has kind of come to fruition like you wanted to. It's time to kind of shift that number a little bit. And I think Tremaine Edmunds is going to be a cap casualty because of that.
Yeah, you figure of the guys who are paid on that defensive side of the football, he's getting a lot of money just to fill in that middle linebacker position. And it leads to, Tucci's question, a lot of people's questions, which way are you going to be spending your money? Is it going to be more offensive heavy, on the offensive line and beyond that, or defense? And defense, what you really need to do is certainly, which the Bears were not able to do, is pressure the quarterback. There's a few guys who are statues in the NFC North, and Jared Goff and Jordan Love and Sam Darnold, and the Bears couldn't get to any, them and a number of quarterbacks this season. It was rare we saw sacks. They were, in the bottom 5 of sack totals for the year. It was rough to see. And as much money as you paid Montez Sweat, there's no relief. DeMarcus Walker couldn't really get pressure. Billings got some pressure. We saw a little bit from Zach Pickens and guys like that, Erger Von Dexter, but it was not production that, you've seen from looking, even within the division. Obviously Detroit took a hit with Aiden Hutchinson going out for the year, but in Green Bay and the Vikings, and then these other teams that are a little more balanced on offense and defense, there's a pass rusher there to fill that need to pressure the quarterback. So I would certainly weigh that if you're looking at 10 overall about us. If you're looking at offensive tackle, if there's no one that impresses you or interior, then you're looking at the best edge rusher available for sure between those positions. And we're going to wrap up the Bears talk, but on the note of Caleb Williams, who's the golden boy going forward, looking at his stats, and obviously he is the quarterback of this Bears team's future, at least the next several years. It was up and down during the season. It was a rough start as expected. The line was in flux, which we went over in depth. He's getting rushed by some of the NFL's best pass rushers and running for his life. He had receiver drops. He sailed some throws. All this was to be expected. It's expected out of rookies, and it's expected when you're adjusting to the speed of the NFL. I think a large number of people expected him to go over 4,000 yards. He was at 3,500, which was passable. It was right behind Jalen Williams, as far as quarterbacks in the league who played 17 games, right behind Jalen Williams. And, what's impressive, the takeaways were his ways to extend the plays. Sometimes it was his downfall, extending far too long. But the fight that this young man had and his attitude sold me on him time and time again. And there's no question that Ryan Poles made the right decision. It was a never say die mentality. Case in point, that Packers game, in the most hostile environment, when you have under a minute to go and you got to get at least about 50 yards, he got it. And he did it his way, and good clock management, all that to be said, not the only time, again, he drove down the field to get the Bears in a position to tie or win the game or extend the game. And that was what stood out to me. The improvements will come as, they did throughout the season in some aspects, but I was impressed with Caleb Williams, and I'm excited to see, them build around this guy going forward and hopefully get an offensive coordinator who can do right by him. That's the big question.
Let me say this about Caleb Williams. This same time last year, this discussion was about nail polish and pink phone cases, and do his teammates like him? And is he a diva? And is he going to work out at the combine? Or is he going to ask out of the Bears? And yada, yada, yada. Bullshit. And what I saw this year was a young man who played all 17 games this year. First time since we've seen that since Jay Cutler. What I saw this year was a young man who dealt with the adversity of going on his a couple different offensive coordinators, a couple different head coaches. I saw a young man who saw his offensive line just be a mess. And not only did he not complain about it, but he actually stood up for them in front of the media less than a week ago and praised all those guys. He was a consummate professional all year. I thought he handled adversity very well. And I thought that he had a very good rookie season, and I'm very impressed with what he did. The fact that he was able to come away this year, like you said, starting all 17 games, over 3,500 passing yards. He had a 20 touchdown to 6 interception ratio. That's the best all time for a number one overall pick. Certainly one of the best in Bears history. 62% completion percentage, 87.8 quarterback rating. For me, that's a successful year. And I am highly encouraged at what this young man can do going forward, because I think now he gets all the bullshit out the way. He gets to jump on an airplane and disappear. I don't care if he's in Florida, California, or Bora Bora. I think he's going to go into the lab. I think he's going to make his body better. I think he's going to focus on the things that went right and the things that went wrong this year. And I think he's going to make himself better. And I think whatever head coach gets him, and hopefully it's Ben Johnson, because I think those two can make beautiful music together. I think Caleb Williams is going to come back next year and really take a giant step under some more stability going forward, which is why it's very important for the Bears to nail this head coaching hire, to nail this draft, and to nail this free agency, because this kid gets it. And he proved all year round, not only is he going to take a hit and get his ass kicked, he's going to get back up. He's not going to complain. He made some hell of a plays. And he's going to learn from this. And so I applaud him for the rookie season he had. I think it was awesome.
And boy, he got hit. You talk about, one of the most sacked quarterbacks, and almost
sacks.
But he almost broke the record, right? Or I don't know where he even ended up, but he was on his ass a lot. And to take that and go into the fourth quarter, and I know they came up short in, that 10-game streak, whatever it was. And then into Green Bay, you did it again in the fourth quarter when it matters most, how you finish games, not how you start them. He showed poise, and that's what I want to see from that guy. And I don't need to see a bomb right away, which he showed a little bit of his arm strength for sure. It's more the accuracy and that ability to make a good decision under pressure. Really impressive from Caleb Williams.
Yeah, he's going to learn, I think, next year going forward. Sometimes, even Steph Curry takes layups. Yeah, right? Yeah. Even Steph Curry shoots 2-pointers. And sometimes they all can't be the big plays. But I think that's on his next head coach going forward, to be able to harness that ability and say, listen, man, I know you're a big game hunter. I know you want to take those big shots, but sometimes we need to take the little plays to get to the big things going forward. He's going to learn. He's a young guy, and he's very smart. He's very intelligent. I think he's very coachable. And I think his teammates really love him. And I'm excited that he's a Bears quarterback going forward. And as we get off of this and we start to talk about some more rookie quarterbacks that are going to be in the playoffs this weekend, I hate this narrative that we've got to knock one of these kids down to pick another one up. Awesome year all the way around. Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, Caleb Williams, Drake May. We didn't even see J.J. McCarthy because he was out for a year. Michael Penix even showed flashes. The NFL is good when all these quarterbacks are good going forward. So we need to get off of that going into 2025 of why I got to be a Caleb Williams fan. So fuck Jaden Daniels or Drake May or something like that. That is nonsense. I want to have our own Brady versus Manning rivalry, or even our own Joe Burrow versus Pat Mahomes rivalry and stuff like that. I want to see Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels in the NFC Championship for the next 5 years.
And we get to see them go head-to-head again next year. Look at that.
Listen, potential Bears road trip, if you're interested, the little DMV trip.
They're talking about it, yeah.
Yes, sir.
It's either that or, Baltimore too, right around there as well.
The Wire is my favorite show of all time, so I would never not go to Baltimore.
Game, stay the game. It would be a fun time. Fun times. Eagles also a good time. We'll discuss that as the offseason rolls on. But this playoff slate is looking good. Here we go. Texans, of course, in another 3:30 Saturday game. The question is, can they move past the first round? Can they beat the Chargers? When healthy, Justin Herbert and company can be a force. That defense has been solid as well. And this Texans team also can I feel like CJ Stroud has held them back to an extent. as we've seen them play out this season. But there's no question that Joe Mixon was a great addition to this offense. They've dealt with a lot of injuries at wide receiver with Nico Collins and Tank Dell. And then, defensively, can they hold up against Justin Herbert? Who do you like in this game, Ross?
I like the Chargers going. I like the Chargers in this game. I know even right now the Chargers are favored in this game by 3 points. This is a home game for Houston. But I think there's a lot of injuries right now on that Texans offense. And I think it's just a little bit too much for them to overcome. Talked about CJ Stroud taking a little bit of a step back this year. He had a lot of adversity too. The offensive line was a little banged up. He missed Nico Collins for a while. There's no Tank Dell out there. There's no Stephon Diggs out there. These guys are banged up a little bit. The Chargers are playing more fundamentally sound football, in my opinion. Justin Herbert is an absolute beast, of course. They found a gem in Ladd McConkey. Even Quentin Johnston has come on of late. He had 13 catches on Sunday, I believe. And they're able to run the football very well. I like the Chargers in a very low-scoring, sloppy game, which usually tends to be the situation. I feel like the Texans have had that first game on Saturday for like 5 years straight now, even going back to the Deshaun Watson days. But Here we are again. And I think, we obviously there's some personal stuff on the line and some human element stuff. The Chargers in LA, they're fighting for a city right now that has some adversity going on. And I think that puts a chip on these guys' shoulders and players' shoulders. You see half your city being burned down right now. You're going to want to go into Houston and at least give your fan base something to at least take solace in and enjoy and forget about what's going on in the real world.
Yeah, sports is one of those best distractions for sure, as the NFL's monitoring that Rams game that's supposed to be hosting the Vikings on Monday night, as it's wildfire ravaging the Palisades and all of LA for that matter. James, on that note of the Chargers, the question, who do you guys think is a better head coaching candidate, Jim Harbaugh or Ben Johnson? And for me, it's Harbaugh because of his track record. It's been pretty incredible, and just in 1 year, getting the Chargers to the playoffs is great. What he did with Michigan, I mean, you could say what you want about how he conducted that program, but he's a winning football mind. I mean, Ben Johnson could be, the next flavor of the month, could be the next Sean McVay, could be whoever, but I just don't know at this point. I think that, you take him away from this just dearth of talent that he has in Detroit, and we'll see how he can run an entire football team. It just doesn't compare to me to Jim Harbaugh's resume.
I agree. You got to take the sure thing. You got to take the guy that's been to the Super Bowl, who was one pass away, from Colin Kaepernick, from winning a Super Bowl in that crazy blackout game years ago, to winning a national championship at Michigan. What he's even been able to do this year. Obviously, the Chargers were not a playoff team last year under Brandon Staley, and they've already gotten there this year. We just picked them to win a game on early Saturday. So, yeah, I would go with Harbaugh as well.
Ravens Steelers, good old-fashioned AFC North.
Slobber knocker. Yeah.
But as good as the Steelers defense has been, and, divisional games, you kind of throw out those records. I'll say it time and time again. Baltimore, favored by 9.5 points. Mm-hmm. Lamar Jackson facing that narrative yet again. They can't get past the big game. Mm-hmm. In between, Chiefs, Ravens, Bills, one of these guys is coming out of the AFC, in my opinion. I'm taking the Ravens. I don't know if they cover that. I think it'll be, sloppy, and Pittsburgh will lean on that defense. But, man, they just can't trust Russell Wilson in this offense. They can't make noise against the Ravens, especially with the Ravens hosting this game.
You hit it on the head. I mean, as much as I like that Pittsburgh defense, that Ravens offense right now is humming right now. Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry in the running game. Hopefully Zay Flowers is healthy. I think that's going to be a key. He got hurt on Sunday. But even Rashad Bateman had a big game. So they're running a complete offense right now. To me, this comes down to, I just don't know how Pittsburgh can score points. I think Russell Wilson has hit a wall. They stopped, for whatever reason, using the Justin Field package, even for a few plays a game. And most importantly, George Pickens is just completely on a milk carton. And that guy is just so untrustworthy. All the talent in the world. But, even in a big game last week, he goes out there and he does nothing. he has no catches and for or he has no yards. That just can't happen. And so because of that, I can't trust that Pittsburgh Steelers offense to be able to keep up with that Ravens offense. And I think underrated on that Ravens defense, I think Kyle Hamilton is one of the better players in the league right now. And we talked about we talked about at the top of the show. We talked about what do you want in the playoffs to get you over the top. And we said you want the quarterback, obviously, but I think the blue chip defensive player is equally as important. We saw the Chiefs win Super Bowl thanks to Chris Jones and the big plays he made. Even going back to Aaron Donald and the big plays he made. And so I start looking around the league in the playoffs and I say, okay, what are your blue chip defensive players that are going to be able to make a big play to win you a football game? And in this game, I look at a guy like Kyle Hamilton, even maybe Roquan Smith, but Kyle Hamilton to me is one of the 10 best players 10 best defensive players in the league right now. And when Russ floats some little bullshit passes out there in the cold in Baltimore, I think Kyle Hamilton is going to have his name written on one of those.
Yeah, and that's a big issue for Pittsburgh. Just taking Saturday out of it is, win or lose, it does not look like Russell Wilson is that guy going forward. And, you don't draft a quarterback out of this class, this last draft, and you go for a guy like Justin Fields, who gave you some W's early on. Not really using him. Is he the guy going forward? It'd be something worth monitoring, but I don't think they get past Saturday. Bills hosting the Broncos and Bo Nix. And Bo Nix, a guy, we were not really impressed with, I feel like, as far as his chances to lead the Broncos into the playoffs. And lo and behold, here they are. They had a great defense this year. But this Bills team, we talked about Josh Allen earlier in the show. What a year he's having. I think, Lamar Jackson finished strong, but you look at the whole of the year, it's tough. You give the edge perhaps to Josh Allen. He's been able to do it all. It's not, putting up 5,000 yards like Joe Burrow in the passing game, but able to get in the end zone and put up points and lead this offense. It seems like a cakewalk for me for the Bills in that noon slate. I don't know if you think otherwise, Ross.
I completely agree with you. That's the MVP of the league right now. He's going to win the MVP. I trust him at home. I think he's on a mission right now to eventually butt heads with Pat Mahomes and get over that hump. I think those fans in Buffalo are going to be there at 8 o'clock in the morning, liquored up on a lot of Fireball and beer and throwing themselves through tables. And most importantly, as good as Sean Payton is as a head coach, I do not trust a rookie quarterback on the road in this spot. I don't trust rookie quarterbacks on the road in the playoffs. And this has trouble for me for Bo Nix and the Broncos written all over it. I think the Bills win. I think they win big.
Yeah, real tough draw for Bo Nix and the Broncos, but they're back in the playoffs. It was like 7-8 seasons, I want to say, something like that. It was a pretty long drought,
Sure.
But better luck next year. That's the first game Sunday, and then the 3:30 game, Eagles hosting the Packers. And Packers, as I mentioned, without Christian Watson, this is a game where I see another blowout too, with the Eagles in a tough place to play. Jalen Hurts looking like a go. Everybody rested. Saquon Barkley, offensive player of the year, just really impressive. And then they got their complement of receivers healthy. They've had a great defense, probably the best secondary in the league that they can rely on. They're favored by 4.5. That seems like the easiest money of the weekend. I think they win big against the Packers, and all, respect to Jordan Love and company, but this is just Philly football here.
I agree. I think this Packers team has got a little bit of fool's gold on it. I don't think Jordan Love is a top tier quarterback. I think Matt LaFleur is a top tier coach, but that team has some real flaws on it. They went 1-5 in the NFC North this year. I don't think a lot of people realize that. They were not as impressive as a lot of people thought. They were some bum slayers throughout the entire season. And then all of a sudden, Jordan Love, because he banged up a little bit, and all of a sudden you don't have Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs tends to disappear in games. I don't know if they're going to be able to run the football when Jalen Carter and the rest of those guys are up the middle. And I think Jalen Hurts is going to be rested. Same thing with Saquon Barkley and ready to go. I think the Eagles, again, another home game for them. That's a tough spot for the Packers to go on the road. I think the Eagles roll their asses.
Yes, sir. And the final game Sunday, Buccaneers hosting the Commanders and Jaden Daniels. And I like the Buccaneers is kind of the, in the wild card round as a real wild card in the NFC. The way they finished, they have an experienced coach, which goes a long way in Todd Bowles, and then Baker Mayfield has been so great, really, making his own case for MVP. If these other guys are not in the conversation, he was amazing. And Mike Evans, talk about amazing, just with one game to go, went over 1,000 yards for what was it, the 13th straight season, something like that. Unbelievable. He's a surefire first ballot Hall of Famer. Even without, Godwin in the lineup, making studs out of McMillan, and I think the defense still has some dogs there with Vita Vea, and up front and company, and again the scheme of Todd Bowles. I think certainly closer of the Sunday games against an upstart Commanders team who's pretty balanced on both sides, and Jaden Daniels can give that team problems, but I think Baker comes out on top.
Yeah, I agree. Tampa Bay has one of my favorite rookies of the year. Nobody's talked about enough. Bucky Irving. If you had Bucky Irving in your fantasy team this year, you probably came close to winning. He's been awesome all season long. Yeah, I agree with you. This game it's like these two teams are like if you had 6 cans of Red Bull and then they just went out there and played. They are so erratic, cardiac kids on both sides. We've seen what Baker can do. Even last week they were supposed to win that game and they almost blew it to win the division. We've seen the Commanders all year have these crazy pull it out of your ass wins. Again, rookie quarterback on the road in the playoffs. Don't think I trust it that much. I trust Liam Cohen in that offense and Baker Mayfield to be able to move the football down the field enough at home. And I trust Todd Bowles to do just enough to make Jaden Daniels to make a key mistake. This could be a high-scoring game, but this could be one of those Jaden Daniels just makes that back-breaking turnover and Baker finishes the job.
There you go. And then we got a Monday nighter. We got the Rams hosting the Vikings, and we talked about Sam Darnold and company, and giving a lot of credit to this Vikings team and what they've been able to accomplish this year. And the Rams also just overcoming adversity and a feel-good story if they're with them hosting it, and then if they're able to get past the Vikings. But Matt Stafford and you really counted them out halfway through the season because of injuries, Puka Nacua or whoever, Cooper Kupp getting re-injured, Matt Stafford not playing up to his potential. But this team's playoff tested, and this is that time where we've talked about it repeatedly in these matchups, where that experience is going to be very important, and head coaching with Sean McVay, I think, is going to be very paramount too. I don't know. Minnesota favored by 1 right now. I feel like I want to give it an advantage to the Rams because they are playing for that sort of other purpose of like we're distracting our home fans at this point, and this is what Matt Stafford's getting up there. This is one of those final rides for him too, and if he can have that accompaniment of healthy guys around him, this offense you could put up them against other guys when they're healthy. Other teams, I should say, with Kyron Williams at running back too. So I give the slight edge to the Rams, I think.
Yeah, this is probably the toughest game of the weekend to call because I think these teams are very evenly matched. I think if this was in Minnesota, this is probably a different conversation. But the fact that the Vikings have to go to LA makes it a little bit different. The fact that it's also a Monday night game makes it a little bit different as well. Obviously we've seen Matt Stafford win big games throughout the playoffs. He has a Super Bowl underneath his belt. We have not seen Sam Darnold do it. And I was not impressed at what he did last Sunday against the Lions to try and get the number 1 overall seed. But maybe he just had a bad game. But I picked the Vikings to go to the Super Bowl a week ago. And so I'm going to stand by that. And I'm going to pick the Vikings to win this game. And I'm going to stand by them going to the Super Bowl this year. I do think that's still a good football team. They just had a bad game last week. And I think KOC is the coach of the year. And I think he fixes it this week and sends the Rams home early.
Ooh, wee! That is some fire. Last pick of our wild card weekend, man. That would be some story. NFC North representing, that's for sure, in the Lions on the bye as well as the Chiefs. We're running out of show. We got to talk about college football playoffs and Texas playing Ohio State, Penn State and Notre Dame. I got Penn State and Ohio State playing for the title game. I think Notre Dame's not luck, but their skill kind of runs out. I think that the Big Ten is still the class of these conferences. Texas has been great, but Ryan Day is back against the wall. He's been able to get the most out of his squad for sure. I think, Ohio State, Penn State all the way.
I completely agree with you. As much as I would like to see Marcus Freeman, I've grown to really like Marcus Freeman and kind of the guy he is. I would like to see him continue and go forward. I do think that Penn State, especially with their defense, is going to be a little too suffocating for Notre Dame. I expect a low-scoring game regardless on both sides. I expect the opposite from Ohio State and Texas. Especially with Jeremiah Smith out there, that's going to be a really high-scoring football game. They got the over/under at 53.5.
Woo.
Jack that sucker up. Take that up to 60 points. Expect some points on Friday night. But yeah, I got a Penn State versus Ohio State national championship, and that means that two guys who were on the hot seat, in James Franklin and Ryan Day, probably get to save their jobs going forward.
Gotta love James Franklin when your boy Keegan-Michael Key plays him on the field. So good. If you all have not been fans of ours for a long time, Ross is a longtime hater of Key and Peele.
That's right. That's right.
They just stole and Dave Chappelle said it best too. He's like, they just stole my show.
On the plus side, they've one of my favorite directors, as you know, is Jordan Peele. So the fact that he's ascended to one of the 5 best directors in all Hollywood right now, especially in the horror genre, I will give Key and Peele a pass on that.
Horror gold. He's like new M. Night Shyamalan. He's outstanding. Great week of football. We wish you all well. Happy 2025, as Ross said. Thanks to everybody for commenting. We got a large number of you. If we didn't get to you, it is what it is, but we will monitor this Bears offseason. For all the breaking Bears news and coverage you want, follow at Barroom Network on social media for all the great shows we have. Shout out to Aldo and Tooch, who were in the comments as well of their own shows. Hopefully you're watching on YouTube here. This show will be up on YouTube after this, as well as Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts and shows. Remember to like, subscribe, tell a friend or two. I'm at The Real Evan Mack. Ross is at Ross Reed. Enjoy, as I mentioned. Everybody be good to each other out there. So long.
Peace.
Thank you.